Your bike, your couch, your kids' toys, and maybe even your car likely traveled across an ocean before reaching you. And there's a very good chance the ship carrying those products was built in China. Even more surprising, many of the parts used to build that ship probably came from China too. China has become the undisputed heavyweight of global shipbuilding. It controls the steel, the components, the factories, and the giant shipyards needed to build modern vessels. Around 34% of all ships currently sailing the world's oceans were built in China. Even more impressive, roughly 57% of ships under construction today are being built there. Back in 1999, China produced less than 5% of the world's ships. By 2023, that number had skyrocketed past 50%. And China's influence goes far beyond simply building ships. Today, about 95% of the world's shipping containers are produced by Chinese companies. One Chinese shipyard now produces more ships every year than all American shipyards.
A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate.
Shipping and maritime logistics have become the latest front in the U.S.-China trade war. Both nations have implemented tit-for-tat port fees on each other's vessels to counter foreign dominance, bolster domestic shipbuilding, and safeguard maritime supply chains.
We are also going to resurrect the American shipbuilding industry, including commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding.
Combined, that's a massive shift for an industry the United States once dominated for decades. Now President Donald Trump wants to change that. As part of a broader effort to reshape America's economic position, he has pushed plans aimed at reviving both commercial and military shipbuilding. We are also going to resurrect the American shipbuilding industry, including commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding. The goal is simple: reduce dependence on China and rebuild American industrial strength. But actually making that happen is a lot more complicated than it sounds. To understand why, we need to look at how China became so dominant in the first place. There was a time when the United States stood at the center of global shipbuilding. During World War II, American shipyards became famous for producing thousands of Liberty ships. These vessels carried supplies, equipment, fuel, and food across dangerous waters and played a major role in supporting Allied forces. The scale was extraordinary. Shipyards worked around the clock, and American industry proved it could build ships faster than almost anyone thought possible. The war left the United States with enormous shipbuilding capacity, experienced workers, and a powerful industrial base. But the decades that followed brought major changes. By the 1970s, Japan had emerged as a shipbuilding powerhouse. South Korea followed during the 1980s and quickly became one of the world's leading producers. Then, in the 2000s, China entered the competition and completely transformed the industry. Today, China, South Korea, and Japan account for the overwhelming majority of global shipbuilding. China's rise wasn't random. It was the result of long-term planning, investment, and economic growth. After joining the World Trade Organization, China's economy expanded rapidly. Factories were producing more goods than ever before. Exports were exploding, and demand for shipping capacity continued to grow. More exports meant more ships were needed to move products around the world. At the same time, Beijing made shipbuilding a national priority. Government plans focused heavily on developing ports, expanding maritime infrastructure, and strengthening industrial capabilities. Shipbuilding wasn't viewed as just another business. It was treated as a strategic industry that could support broader economic growth. The strategy fit perfectly with China's strengths. The country already had enormous steel production, strong manufacturing capabilities, and a large workforce. It could produce huge amounts of industrial materials while also supplying the skilled labor needed to build increasingly advanced vessels. Government support helped accelerate the process even further. Investments, financing programs, and long-term planning encouraged companies to expand. Over time, shipyards became more efficient and more competitive. That created a powerful cycle. The more ships Chinese companies built, the lower their costs became. Lower costs attracted more customers. More customers brought more orders. And more orders helped strengthen China's position even further. Meanwhile, the United States was moving in a very different direction. Over several decades, America shifted toward a service-based economy. Manufacturing became a smaller share of employment, and many industrial jobs moved overseas. While the U.S. remained a global economic leader, industries like shipbuilding no longer occupied the same central role they once had. The difference is reflected in the numbers. A large container ship built in China may cost around $55 million. A comparable ship built in the United States could cost roughly $330 million. That's not a small difference. That's a gap large enough to completely reshape purchasing decisions across the industry. The order books tell an even more dramatic story. Between 2020 and 2022, Chinese shipyards received orders for more than 4,000 large ocean-going vessels. During that same period, American shipyards received orders for only 12. In 2024, the United States produced just 0.01% of the world's commercial ships. One major Chinese state-owned shipbuilder reportedly produced more commercial vessel tonnage in a single year than the entire American shipbuilding industry has produced since the end of World War II. Those numbers highlight just how difficult it would be for America to reclaim a significant share of the market. The challenge is that shipbuilding is one of the most demanding industries on the planet. It requires giant facilities, highly skilled workers, specialized suppliers, and enormous amounts of capital. Building modern cargo ships is not something that can be scaled up overnight. China's government has spent years supporting the industry. Between 2010 and 2018, estimates suggest government support reached roughly $132 billion. That figure doesn't even include other forms of assistance such as favorable financing, investments, and support from state-owned enterprises. Supporters argue these policies helped China become globally competitive. Critics argue they created advantages that are difficult for other countries to match. If the United States wants to rebuild its shipbuilding sector, many experts believe it would likely require substantial long-term investment. New shipyards would need to be built or expanded. More workers would need training, supply chains would need to grow, and all of that would take years. Trump's proposed solution includes imposing major fees on Chinese-built, Chinese-owned, and Chinese-operated ships entering American ports. Under the proposal, fees could start at around $1 million per port visit and potentially rise much higher. Some estimates suggest charges could reach $3.5 million every time certain ships dock in the United States. Supporters say the policy could encourage companies to look beyond Chinese-built vessels and create incentives for domestic investment. Critics see significant risks. Higher shipping costs could eventually reach consumers through higher prices on imported goods. Transportation companies could also change routes to avoid additional expenses. That could create ripple effects throughout supply chains. Shipping companies constantly adjust routes based on costs and efficiency. If port fees become significantly more expensive, some operators could reduce stops at certain U.S. ports or redesign shipping networks altogether. As a result, more cargo could end up moving by truck or rail after arriving at fewer locations. Distribution patterns that have existed for years could change dramatically. Many experts argue that rebuilding American shipbuilding requires a more targeted strategy. Instead of trying to recreate China's entire industrial system, they suggest focusing on specific areas where the United States already has strengths. Expanding parts manufacturing, specialized ship components, advanced technology, and critical supply chains could be more realistic than trying to dominate every segment of ship production. The United States also has important allies. South Korea and Japan remain among the world's leading shipbuilders and have decades of expertise. Stronger cooperation with those countries could help increase capacity while reducing dependence on any single source. But the debate isn't only about economics. For many policymakers, the issue is increasingly tied to national security. Supporters of rebuilding American shipbuilding argue that relying heavily on foreign-built ships creates strategic vulnerabilities. Shipping plays a critical role in global trade, military logistics, and supply chains. The ability to build and maintain vessels is often viewed as an important part of national strength. That security argument has become a major factor driving discussions in Washington. At the same time, the push to revive shipbuilding fits into a larger effort to strengthen domestic manufacturing and reduce reliance on overseas production. Tariffs, industrial policy, and trade measures are all part of that broader conversation. Still, many experts remain skeptical about the idea of a full-scale return to America's shipbuilding dominance. China, Japan, and South Korea have spent decades building their positions. They operate at enormous scale, have extensive supply networks, and continue to attract the majority of global orders. Because of that, few analysts expect a return to the days when American shipyards ruled the world's oceans. But one thing is clear: this debate is about much more than ships. It's about manufacturing, trade, national security, economic power, and who will shape the future of global commerce. And that's why the battle over shipbuilding has become one of the most important industrial stories in the world today.